Welcome to Sun-Grown Stories, the podcast where we explore all things cannabis under the sun. I'm your host, Alexandria Irons, and today we're diving into the price of pot and the green economy. From ancient rituals to modern dispensaries, we'll uncover how this plant has influenced societies and economies throughout history. So, without further ado, let's get started. Our journey begins in ancient times, where cannabis was first utilized for its medicinal and ritualistic properties. One of the earliest recorded uses comes from ancient China. According to texts like Shen Nong Ben Cao Jing, cannabis was used as a treatment for various ailments as early as 2737 BCE. It was highly valued for its medicinal properties, but its economic value was also significant. Unfortunately, I have been unable to locate ancient prices of pot, but the fact that they are documented throughout history, 5,000-6,000 years ago, obviously that was being paid for. We just don't have the exact price. So, moving to the Middle East, archaeologists have discovered cannabis residue on artifacts from ancient temples in Israel dating back to the 8th century BCE. This actually provides the first evidence of cannabis being used in religious rituals in ancient Jewish culture. Many people argue that cannabism in the Bible is cannabis, and that the healing anointment, that oil, was hash oil, or that was a constituent of it. I mean, we all know how healing this plant is. Ancient societies did as well. Interestingly, a recent study published in Science Advances revealed that cannabis was used for ritual smoking in Western China at least 2,500 years ago. Researchers found chemical residues in wooden braziers from ancient tombs, indicating that cannabis played a role in religious ceremonies. Again, we've already covered this. We know it's religious, it's spiritual, it's sacred. Now, as we move into the medieval period, the use of cannabis spread to different parts of the world and for different purposes. So this is where we're going to see that flip side in medieval Europe, where hemp was a crucial crop for making ropes and textiles. This industry provided a significant economic boost to European economies. Now, today we have this difference in industries, hemp versus cannabis, right? And it's the same freaking plant, but because of laws, regulations, we treat it separately. There's two separate industries, two separate sets of rules that the companies may and have to abide by. And so today I have interviews from both sides of the industry. I have Nathan Beckham from the hemp side. He is the CEO of Lucid, and Nelson Lindsley, Poetry of Plants, in the cannabis sector. So we'll see that later on, and compare and contrast the differences that these two companies, these two people have to go through for literally the same plant, but it's treated economically different because of today's rules and regulations. All right, I digress. So medieval period, right? They're using hemp. They're using it to make ropes, textiles, super important throughout Europe. And on that flip side, in the Islamic world, cannabis, particularly in the form of hashish, became widely popular. It was both used recreationally and medicinally, and the trade of hashish flourished. There's literal hashish trade routes that extend throughout the Middle East and North Africa. And you can go to these bazaars and hash markets today. They're widely illegal, but they're still going on in some of these places that they have been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years. This is part of their culture, part of their life, and a significant part of their economy. So many people rely on cannabis in one form or another to support their families, me included, and probably a lot of you listeners. And while many people can say, oh, you shouldn't be trying to make money off this plant, it's also a sacred plant that we tend to take care of, and it has become our life, our livelihood, our lifestyle. And I think that the people who are making money off of it should consider this plant sacred and be all in about it. But again, I'm going off on a tangent. So fast forward, let's get out of the ancient times and let's talk about what's going on nowadays in modern history. So we're going to the 19th century. And this is before Prohibition. We're seeing cannabis sold in pharmacies and apothecaries across Europe and North America. And the specific company, Park Davis and Eli Lilly, marketed cannabis-based medicines. And for instance, in the early 1900s, you could buy a bottle of their cannabis tincture for around $1 to $2. Cannabis was, in fact, the most widely used and incorporated ingredients in medicine in the early 19th and 20th century. This commercialization marked a significant shift in the cannabis industry. So people were making money off of it. It was included in all different types of medicines. Unfortunately, that didn't last long. The landscape changed drastically. And we talked about this in the last, earlier in the season, so you can go back and listen to that episode. But basically, the introduction of Marijuana Tax Act of 1937 is what led to the criminalization of cannabis. And there's a wide range of reasons this was passed. Lobbyists, fuck those lobbyists. So go back and listen to that. This act led to the criminalization of cannabis, essentially pushing it into the black market. During the 1930s, a marijuana cigarette or reefer could be bought for about 10 cents each. And the economic impact of Prohibition was profound, leading to significant law enforcement costs and loss of potential tax revenue. This pushed the price of pot up. Obviously, inflation as time goes on, but the more illegal it is, the more expensive it is. In recent decades, we've witnessed a resurgence in the cannabis industry with the wave of legalization across various states and countries. This shift has had a substantial economic impact. According to 2024 statistics from FlowHub, the legal cannabis industry in the United States generated billions of dollars in revenue. The industry has created hundreds of thousands of jobs and contributed to significant tax revenue to state and local governments. The market for cannabis products has diversified immensely. For example, high-end products like cannabis caviar are selling for $1,400 per ounce, while other strains like Loud Dream and Isla OG canned cannabis are going for about $800 per ounce. I don't know who's paying those prices. Actually, I do. Thank you, Cat Lady, for pulling up. There are rappers, freaking paying who specifically? Let's see. 2 Chainz smoking weed that cost $1K on the ounce. The world's most expensive blunt cost $50K. It's just like clout chasing and trying to just say that you have, really expensive things. Because the average price for a gram of cannabis in the US at a dispensary is about $9.99, compared to $6.40 on the street, according to Gold Leaf. Now, if you're in the game, you're in the industry, you ain't paying those prices. That's for damn sure. And a way to skip that is grow your own, everyone. Grow your own. It's way better when you grow it yourself. If you need help growing it, reach out to me. I have a wide range of resources and love helping people get set up on growing their own pot. It's so fun and addicting. It's the gateway crop. So if you don't garden yet, you will be. Let me tell you, you start gardening cannabis, you're going to be growing tomatoes and potatoes and all kinds of things by the end of your gardening career. So get into it. It's great. Okay. So now let's take a look at how cannabis prices and consumption vary around the world. These are a little dated, but according to the 2018 Cannabis Price Index by CEDAW, which used data from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, the price of cannabis can vary dramatically depending on the location. And I pulled this from a Vice magazine. You can check it in the show notes. But the most expensive cannabis in the world is found in Tokyo, Japan. where a gram sells for approximately $32.66. This high price reflects the strict drug laws and risks associated with its illegal status. Remember, the more illegal it is, the more expensive it is. On the other end of the spectrum, the cheapest cannabis can be found in Quito, Ecuador, and Bogota, Colombia. In Quito, a gram costs about $1.34, and in Bogota, it's around $2.20. These low prices are influenced by the local supply, demand, and the relative ease of cultivation in these regions. It's fucking warm and nice and sunny. God, I miss that. So cold here. In cities where cannabis is at least partially legal, prices also vary. For example, in Boston, Massachusetts, a gram costs about $11, reflecting the regulated market and higher taxes. In contrast, Montevideo, Uruguay, where cannabis is fully legal, a gram costs approximately $4.15. Okay, get this. I don't even know where they got this, really. When it comes to consumption, supposedly New York City tops the list of the highest average cannabis consumption in the world. What the fuck? Estimated at 77.4 metric tons per year. This high consumption rate is likely due to the large population and the city's evolving legal landscape for cannabis. But Chicago was on there. I think LA might have been. Check out the list if you want to. All of these resources are in the show notes. But looking to the future and economic potential of cannabis as it continues to grow, legalization could lead to even more significant economic benefits through increased tax revenue, job creation, and the development of ancillary businesses such as paraphernalia, technology, consulting, smoke lounges. I mean, there's so many puff and paints, like there's so many cool things. Everything's better with pot, right? So let's all focus on legalization. We don't want to reschedule. We want to deschedule. We want access. We want freedom. This is our sovereign human right to have access to this plant. Talk about it and as you can see, it's a part of human history, economically, spiritually, medicinally. So, according to a 2024 marijuana industry statistic provided by FlowHub, half of Americans have tried cannabis. 79% of Americans live in a county with at least one dispensary. There are 445 full-time equivalent jobs supported by legal cannabis, probably more than that, I would have to imagine. The U.S. cannabis industry is expected to reach almost $40 billion in 2024, and 1 in 3 women over 21 consume cannabis. Cannabis will add $115.2 billion to the economy in 2024, and adult use cannabis is now legal in 24 states. Support for legalizing cannabis hit a record 70% of the US population supports legalizing cannabis. Hells yeah. And ranks of women in minority cannabis executives are rebounding. Cannabis earns higher tax revenue than alcohol in 9 states. Boo. Average retail cannabis price dropped 32% since 2021. Okay. Yep, prices are going down. Like I said, as legalization spreads, prices go down. So get your bag while you can, but let's focus on patients and plants over profits, right? Dispensaries accepting debit earn an average of $4,627 more than cash-only retailers. Okay. Interesting. So the industry is growing and booming, and we're seeing that all over the country, or all over the world, actually. However, challenges remain, including regulatory hurdles, banking issues. What up, motherfuckers? My bank account has been shut down before. I don't know. This is another side tangent. I tried to buy a home. I worked my ass off and tried to buy something this past fall, winter, spring, just looking, and got through. I mean, I worked my butt off, paying my taxes, doing all of the things right, saving money for a down payment, getting my credit score up. And the underwriter wouldn't give us a loan because my husband's W-2 job was at a cannabis farm. Get that. Are you serious? This is fucking discrimination. Because of its illegality, its federal illegality, we could not qualify for a loan. So shout out. Also, if you need any help with trying to figure out cannabis banking, real estate, reach out to me as well. I'll pop my email, send me a message. This is something that I'm very passionate about now, is having just gone through it, and I love helping people figure things out. Okay, anyways, for today's episode, I have interviewed two different folks, Nelson Lindsley of Poetry of Plants and Nathan Beckham of Hemp Lucid. We're going to start off with the traditional market. Nelson Lindsley, Poetry of Plants, talking about what it's like from making music in the traditional market, slanging, consulting, from his involvement with Base Nerds, the fertilizer, slow release fertilizer, to what he's got going with his exclusive flower drops in LA and Chicago. So, without further ado, give it up for Nelson Lindsley. All right, welcome to Sungrown Stories. I'm super stoked to have you here. Nelson, aka Poetry of Plants. We've been following each other for like at least 5 years, I feel like, and like stalking on the internet. So welcome, and so happy to finally have a real life kind of conversation, virtual conversation. Thank you, and you as well, dude. I mean, in this industry, it is just craziness. We've got to be all kinds of entrepreneurs and creative and just get around and do all kinds of different things. And you are a perfect example of always doing all kinds of things. So give us a little introduction for people who don't know who you are, and tell us what you've got going on the last 5 years.
So I've been in the cannabis industry for a long time. It first started as a way to finance my music career when I was a late teenager and early 20s. I moved to California and got a record deal when I was 24 with a big label, and had fun doing that. And you didn't get paid a lot of money when you're on a record deal unless you made the record label.
Drop a link. I want to hear young Nelson singing.
Yeah, so it just I put an album out last year that was like a COVID album, I guess, and it's just under my name, Nelson Lindsley. That's Lindsley. But cannabis was a part of funding initially what I was doing with music, and it was a part of my musical expression. And then when I moved to California, I was around a bunch of growers and started growing. And the same way that I would get obsessive about engineering with music production, I became obsessive about grow room design and engineering of grow rooms. And I was in LA, and so it was all indoor growing. And I grew for a period of time during Prop 215. So when there were medical dispensaries, so I got a good chunk, about 4 or 5 years of experience in the medical market. And then I took it got crazy, and I took a couple years off from that. And I went and studied wildlife biology, worked for a wildlife company, and then I got hired by a pest control company to take some of that knowledge and help them develop some things in their innovation department. And then I moved back to California, and this was around 2013, and people started to hit me up about legalization that was happening in Washington, guys that ran dispensaries that I used to sell to, and they were asking me if I wanted to be a part of some of the ventures that they were doing in other states. I had so much crazy stuff that had happened in like 2011 and 2012 that I really didn't want to go back into the space, because it was like
understandable.
It was just like I had a kid. I was trying to figure out how to be a good dad. And during that time, at the end of the Prop 215 era, it just got, I just stopped recognizing who I was, because to survive in that era, you had to be able to do things that were crazy at some times. It wasn't like the medical co-op ideal I was really into, and I enjoyed producing flower, bringing it to dispensaries, and working with the dispensaries. But in LA, they would go through these series of raids where everything would be okay. There was a period of time when there was more dispensaries than Starbucks or every fast food chain combined. And then they would crack down, and then the medical laws didn't matter. So there was this vacillation happening back and forth, and where you'd be okay, you'd have your paperwork, and then it wouldn't matter. And then the cops and the DEA would come in and take everything and throw you in jail. And I literally walked away from a space that was essentially had been compromised. And, I could write a book about it. I don't want to get into all of it. It's like, but really nasty situation that I got out of by just walking out of the grow and essentially living on the street for 2 months and
Oh my
disappearing.
God.
Yeah. So it was a very gnarly situation. And I'm like, okay, that chapter is closed. And then I took about a year and a half off, got into the wildlife stuff, was really into that. I was like catching wild hogs and the panhandle of Florida and doing all kinds of things. And I enjoyed it. And then I came back to California and I was getting hit up left and right. And so I just started doing some consults. I'm like, I don't want to be a part of your company or whatever, but you can pay me for the week or whatever. And I'll come do some work. And I saw the states become, Washington was the first one I went and did a small project in, and this was before Proposition 64 in California. And I actually went to the first licensed grow in Washington that was getting their license. It was in Yakima. It was surrounded by hops farms. It was a Costco cut flower warehouse.
Crazy.
And I don't know what happened with that. They were just going to throw lights up and not build rooms and just grow the plants in there. And I was like, that's a bad idea. So that was around 2013, 2014. And then more opportunities started coming through some of these old relationships I had from the dispensary days. So I started taking them and got connected with a lot of the guys that were early in the licensing and for Prop 64, mostly in Desert Hot Springs and Adelanto, which is the area in Southern California where they were doing the local permitting first. And so I was there for those early meetings and got to see everything that was going on, and got to see the chaos and the grift and the corruption and the mixture of dirty politicians and organized crime come in. And it was exciting. And right around that time period too, I was working on a project for a client, and they were trying to fund the build out of one of the projects that they had in Adelanto. And they did not want to upgrade the power for the building, but they wanted to get a specific amount of revenue from it. And that's when I connected with a company called BML, who became Fluence, because I had seen some videos about this LED light that was more efficient. And I'd always played around with crazy technology and crazy ideas. I always had like a building during Prop 215 where I was experimenting and trying different things and using other spaces and other ways to kind of fund these experiments. Plus, like, the value of cannabis was so high back then. If you didn't have like a banging yield, you still could be profitable and make money. So there was room to really play around with things. I've posted some pictures of some of that stuff before, although I don't have too much of those photos from back in the day because we didn't take pictures. I was super paranoid, like coming in, like coming from Florida to California. And Florida was a 5-year mandatory minimum if you got caught with an ounce. And coming out to California, walking into a space where there was a couple 100 pounds just sitting on the table and everyone was just like chilling. It was like complete shock for me at first. But I've kind of stayed with the old ethos about really just not talking about all that stuff. So that's really where things kind of began as far as going back to what I was talking about. I got the first run of this Fluence full spectrum lights, which were called Spiders. And I set them up and I did pretty well with them right out of the gate. And a lot of people were struggling with them. So Fluence used the grow, this grow is in Pacoima, as like in the hood in Pacoima. And it became like this hub for Fluence to bring customers in to try and sell their lights. Because a lot of people that were trying LEDs for the first time were killing their plants. And I wasn't. Like the run looked pretty good. And then I moved on to work with a company called Greenstone. They had 2 licenses in Desert Hot Springs and Adelanto. They ended up becoming a distribution company and abandoned their cultivation licenses. And that's when I set up my consultancy. But the whole time there, I was being given spaces to continue to experiment and play around with lighting and play around with different methodologies. and not really have there be a lot of pressure on growing for revenue. It was more like, we're going to pay you to figure this out. So I was really fortunate to have groups that brought me in, enjoyed me being there, enjoyed how I thought about things, and basically would create these little labs for me to experiment. I'm dropping a packaged flower product with my genetics in it, with a grower that buys plants from the nursery that I partnered with, where I do all the genetics work. So where it's evolved is like support, seeing, going into consulting, seeing where the market's going, kind of being able to be in a lot of different rooms and a lot of different times, which has provided me a lot of insight. Being in the room with the small growers that come from the legacy side, and then also being in the room with some of the bigger MSOs to understand what's going on with them. And then to really try and find a path and to help people that I work with navigate the craziness. And then for me, come up with products and ideas and other services that I think will be of value of where the industry is right now. Now, what I do on social media is a little bit of that, but mostly social media. I'm just kind of poking at things that I see, making fun of the madness. That's evolved. I used to be a little bit more volatile and pointed, and I don't think that that's actually helpful anymore, like the trolling or whatever. So it's, now I'm just trying to kind of cover general things that we can all laugh at without making too many enemies, because there's not a lot of room for nuance online. And at the end of the day, I think I used to be very angry about what I saw happening in the industry, because for me, gardening, growing the plant, really, really working with the plant helped me out personally. I was talking about this with somebody earlier, and I've said this before, that your garden is a reflection of your inner state. And it's been a good mirror pool for me, and also just understanding life. And one of the greatest things about cannabis is that you have people at every different level of life that are growing this plant, every different socioeconomic level, and they're learning biology, and they're learning how to have relationships with another life form, where what you put in is what you get back out. And I think that's something that's sacred and awesome. And when it comes into the world of commerce, that spirit can really get fucked with. And sometimes I would get upset or angry, and I would take that out through, vengeful humor. And I think after that first Smoke of the Day podcast I did, and I kind of just put it all out there, I realized that approach or that strategy, like reflecting back on it and seeing the effect of that, was not actually going to do very much except to continue to create noise. And so now my thought process and idea, and also, like, I was putting out negative energy, and you get that back, and I definitely got that back, and I can handle it. But the problem is, those people then started going after people that weren't me, but were around me, like my family and people that I work with. And like, to me, like, I got to the point where my skin was thick enough where I could take whatever on the chin that people would say about me, because, like, they don't know me, they're just trying to take me down. But if they were going after people that I care about, that's a problem, because none of those people in my life signed up for my antics online. So number one, not good. That's not good. Number two, that got me thinking about what I was actually doing with that, and whether that was actually helpful or beneficial. And even though it would make everybody laugh, at the same time, it was kind of still just a destructive energy, and it wasn't creating something to take the place of what I was not happy with. So now the last year and a half, I've been really focused on developing relationships with the businesses and the people that I already had ongoing, and strengthening what they're doing and their relationships with their customers, and trying to create a competing model of a business that I think we should have in this cannabis industry. Instead of getting pissed off about everything that's wrong, I want to create what we should have. And that's what the focus has been. And my life has changed for the better, focusing on that. And I highly recommend anybody on here who's like pissed off or upset. Well, that's an opportunity to create that thing that you would want or expect. So who cares what everybody else is doing? Because ultimately, those people that are doing those things that are corrupt or slimy, they're not going to have long legs. They're not going to run in the race for very long, because that kind of behavior just eats itself. It's like cancer, and they just won't be around. So that's been the, like, whatever, the enlightenment I've had from being an asshole online. And now I try to hold my tongue, even if someone pisses me off. Like, I'm just like, okay, let's let this go. And then if I start getting too involved on the online stuff, I'll just take a step back and take a breather. So that's what I'm doing now. That's philosophically what I'm doing now.
Good,
And
good. I'm glad to hear that.
yeah, yeah. So that's where I'm at.
How is your flower brand then? How are you working that? Like it's a licensing agreement or what?
Yeah, so how it works, and I think one of the things that I looked at with other license, it is a licensing agreement, um, and it's a small percentage off of whatever they're selling it for, but we kind of get to talk about what it's selling for, and then I'm providing genetics that I've created or hunted, and most of them are coming from everything that I've created over the last 7 years. So a project I've been working on for 7 years for breeding that I was doing wherever I could, my backyard, indoor grows, all of that, the pirate ship, all that kind of stuff, which is what I used to call the traps before I shut them all down earlier this year. And what I do is I get to help them with the cultivation as well. Whereas it's not just dropping the genetics and going from that place. I get to develop a relationship with this crew there and come in and help them if there's any issues and improve what they're doing. So bringing the almost 20 years of experience I have in the garden to the table, and then doing the QC. So this is going to be the first time I've done this. It's happening in Illinois and California right now, and we'll see how it goes. I'm sure I'm going to get my ass kicked and learned a lot in the process, which
I would
is
love
just,
to just keep in touch and hear about this. Somebody
yeah,
kind of offered something to me similarly. I don't have genetics, but just to like someone I consulted on and asked me the same thing, like if we could create a brand. And I was like, I just don't know about because I can't control the quality that's being put out. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, I don't know if I want, like, that's
That's the
just me
hardest
being
point.
controlling.
Yeah, well, that's the hardest point. So I'm not doing big drops. They're it's not more than 10 pounds in each market. So a lot of things can go wrong in the process. A lot of times things are messed up in the post processing, or just getting things to the point of sale can take a lot longer. So for me, even if I really hope this works out, because I really enjoy making the bags and getting to select the. I really do. Like I like dived into Illustrator and I'm pulling things that like I would like to see on bags, because I feel like the marketing is like weird with cannabis, where it's kind of geared for kids in a weird way. And I'm like, that's not the point of this. So let's do something cool and artistic that brings in some of these animation elements and makes it interesting, but for an adult consumer base, not like geared up for, like, I guess adults collect Pokemon cards, but I look at like a lot of these cannabis bags as like, they look like Pokemon cards to me, which is strange. So, no hate on Pokemon cards, just not my generation. So that part of it is fun. I come from an artistic background, so being able to be a part of engineering all of that and putting it together, and then these are genetics that I bring to the table with Highline, and really the point of it is like I can drop new flavors through. Very fortunate to have some retail space to be able to drop new flavors that are going to be variations off of what's really popular right now and what sells at our nursery. 95% of what sells is either runts or lemon cherry gelato. And right now, it's the brokers, the wholesale brokers, that determine what people are buying and what gets put on shelves. And I would like to wrestle the control away from them, because they're ultimately the ones creating the consumer value. And I would like to start slipping in some more diversity of different lineages and things that I think are better, or not necessarily better, but just diverse and interesting, where you're going to have the consumer is going to have a different experience. Because if all they're drinking is Coca-Cola, which is what I kind of feel like Runts is now, you're not going to know, like, you bring them a fresh coconut, or, pineapple juice. They're like, what is that? But
Yeah,
I've just
well,
been
this is
drinking Coca-Cola.
America.
It is America, and that's the cool thing about it. Because then we have if we're willing to try, we can start to change some of those things, and we don't know what will catch on, because there's always a way to create those avenues, and I've been able to do it through all the wicked banner I've had online. I've created friends that see the market and share the same philosophy, and they have retail. And so that to me has been exciting, that people would come along the journey with me and then want to bring me in and appreciate my voice. And now my main goal is to try and take advantage of that opportunity as much as possible by bringing things new into the market. So like what's dropping first right now are variations off of things that people currently enjoy, which are like the Sunset Sherb family and then the Rainbow Belts family. But what's following up behind that is, some old headband crosses that we crossed into Cherry Stout from Heroes of the Farm. Patrick, who's been a really good friend of mine for almost a decade now in this industry, and he's gone through ups and downs in his path, but he's one of the most incredible breeders that not a lot of people know about, and he's created a lot of really interesting uh, profiles and experiences that I absolutely love. But because of the volatility of the market, his presence, he's just been trying to survive and fight legal battles and all these other kinds of things, and that's a story that he'll get to tell. But I don't want to lose what he's developed, because he was the guy doing all the work for Subcool. So all of his catalog is like all of these old Subcool lineages that come from, 30 or 40 years worth of work. And it's a very different experience. It's like weed that makes me want to jam and play guitar. And that's like really what I look for now, is like, what's going to get me creative? What's going to get me inspired? And that's that. It's the brand is called Legacy, and I don't know what dispensaries we're dropping at yet. Good question. But the brand's Legacy, and they're outside of Chicago.
Okay. And then Cat Lady wants to know, how are you making 10-pound batches worth it? Like, how are you able to
I'm
monetize?
not. I'm losing money off of it essentially. So
That's okay.
so
The best projects lose money in the beginning.
yeah. I mean, I'm putting way more time and energy into it than it profits, but I look at it long term. Like, and that's the thing. Like, for them, it's worth it, but it's really about giving me an opportunity to go connect with consumers. When I was in Pennsylvania during the pandemic, I helped start up a company for a client that I had, which went good and bad. But the best thing about it was I would go connect with the people that were actually buying from the dispensary. I would get to hear what they wanted or liked or didn't like. And then I would bring that information back to the grow. And then we would change things based off of what the consumers wanted. And so I'd like to, I'm going to be doing that in Illinois. I'm going to be doing that in California. And I want to hear where people are at. And then, I'll put my own spin on that, of course. But to me, that's the fun part. And so the monetary, it will only be worth it if this grows and if it's successful. And for it to be worth it, it would have to be a minimum like 10 times what's going out now, because I have to take care of the farm. All the farms I'm working with are getting paid $300 to $500 more than they would be getting paid. So I'm making sure that the farm gets taken care of first. I'm making sure that the nursery that has the cut's getting first. And really, I can win if the cut does well in the retail market, and then other farms want to buy that cut because I get a royalty from the genetics I bring the high line. So
Okay.
the creative approach to this is creating multiple possible forms of revenue streams from the promoting, from the marketing, from going out there, from doing the development and doing all that work. So I might lose 10 grand on every flower drop just doing all the work I have to do to promote it. But in 2 or 3 months, if a cut catches on, I'm going to make, 10 times that over the next season. So that's kind of the approach. And so it's not a quick money kind of play. This is a long-term play, develop it. And even if a cut doesn't come on and people don't want it, it doesn't really matter to me, because I'm out there, I'm still participating, I'm still playing the game, I'm still meeting people. And then also opportunities come just from putting yourself out there. If you're
Oh,
not
yeah.
participating, you don't get those opportunities.
Definitely. You sound just as crazy as me. Just say it. Just say it. And it is such a crazy market, and everything's changing, and you have to be on your toes and ready to pivot. I mean, I have done so many different things with Queen of the Sun. It's just like, okay, what am I going to do this year? What am I going to do this? What am I going to do? So being in this volatile market and having to just be on your toes and do so many different things and pivot, how are you utilizing the community, I don't know, to like just network with all of these different people? You're just keeping your options open. What influences your decisions for like when you think, oh, this is going to be a good idea, this is what I want to do? Because you've done so many different things.
I what influences? Well, okay. So for Beanstalk, I'll use Beanstalk as an example. So when Beanstalk was initially brought to me, the guys behind the company just wanted me to test the product out and prove that it would work. And what I saw were benefits that they didn't know about, right? Because I was in it. And that's the thing. It's like once you give yourself something, like when I go do something, I do it fully. And when you do it fully, most people don't do things fully. Most people are looking at an angle to cut corners, which means they're not doing it fully. If you do it fully, you see things holistically and you'll see opportunities and potentials that other people don't see. So I noticed parts of that product that were like, for me, I was like, this is like, initially, I was like, this is just like some other crap that they sell at Home Depot that I would never want to put in my plants, but I didn't really understand it. And then I saw something with how the plants were vegging that I'd never seen before. Now, no one else that was working on that product before had even used it on a plant to even see that. They just were jumping into the hype. So that, putting myself into it, I began to see an opportunity that, like, no matter what, this could be a product for the nursery market. That was my first thought, because of what I was seeing as far as the vegetative growth and how it was explosive. And so when I'm going into, like, part of my job as a consultant is going in and figuring out what's going wrong. Every time you figure out why something's not working right, you find an opportunity. So when I started looking at retail, I started looking at things that were going on retail that I feel like could be better, right? So it's really just looking at things in a creative. It's finding similarities between two dissimilar things. That's like what creativity is. So I love that. I look at everything as a puzzle, as a game, not a game against people, but it's like, how can we improve this? How can we make this better? Sometimes it ends up becoming a complete and total disaster. And sometimes you, which is fine. You're like, okay. And I've had many times where I put a lot of energy into something and then been just left with pieces at the end of the day. And be like, okay, well, what do I learn from this? So how I go into things is I try and look at things. I just try and look at things from a different lens the best I can. And then there's certain standards that come into play that where you just don't need to really fix them anymore. You don't need to really look at that anymore. I'm working on a light now with BIOS that's going to be coming out very soon. And well, what am I doing with the light? Well, the light is going to mirror it's an LED, but it's going to mirror high pressure sodium and spectrum and in red levels. Well, why did I, for the last 3-4 years, I've been hearing people say, I'm going back to high pressure sodium. High pressure sodium grows better flower, right? And I'm like, okay, well, why is that, right? Could it be the way that the light is being driven, either through electricity or gas, or is it a spectrum? So I looked at that, and then I started testing. Well, can I get what people were looking for with high pressure sodium with LED by mirroring a high pressure sodium spectrum? So that's where it is. So now it can be merged out. So I'm just giving you examples of where the ideas came from, and then I did the best I could trials on that. I did see a difference. And then the last 2 years, I've been trying, 2.5 years, I've been trying to pitch companies to make this light, which has been really hard. Now, how did I do that? Well, then I had to go out with the lighting companies and listen to the growers with them and be like, the growers that aren't buying your lights, what are they buying? They're buying high pressure sodium lights. Can we make this light now? So that took like 1.5 years to get people to even buy into the idea. But I'm just very persistent. I'm probably annoying. And I'm probably too much. I've got a lot of energy and I continually put it in until if people aren't into it, I'll just exhaust them until they concede. And that's where I think I've gotten me right now.
That's great advice. Just be persistent, keep on trying and
Be
doing.
respectful, but yeah.
Yeah.
You deal with the heartbreak, you deal with the struggle, you punch the sky, and then you get over it and you figure out something else. And that's kind of what we all need to do collectively. But what happens is people will get resentful and then they get bitter, and there's no recovery from bitterness.
You have the same, I think that I have the same perspective as you in that, like, diversifying is always the small farmers way forward in any type of agriculture. Like, you can't really, subsistence farmers they make, like, I think on average their profit is like $2,000 a year. Like a regular subsistence farmer who's growing vegetables and stuff, it's like insane, but they love it because it pays for their food, their home, they're doing the lifestyle,
Yeah.
And so with cannabis, I think that it's like very similar, but I just don't think that we can hold on to the ideals that it's going to be like this big money maker, because I don't think it should. I think that cannabis should be cheaper. I think it should be available to people. I think it should be treated as medicine. Yeah, there's a lot of care and thought, but I think that so many people are just trying to take money from it. like the distributors and the lawmakers and I mean, so
Well,
the
it's
all of
can
it.
I can I can I
Yes.
want to comment on that real quick. So there's the idea that people have made money on it, and what I would say is people that were the people already made their money off of it, and now it's a job. And the goal for most businesses is just to break even. If you can hit profitability, it's great, you know. But if can we break even and keep things going? And if we like I'm not supposed to talk about. I can't talk about some things, but I'll tell you this: like with the nursery, I got to help them get to the point where they were breaking even after all these farms went out. Like the nursery had a couple good years, and then everything kind of tanked, and then it was like we were living month to month, and it was scary. And you know, there's 80 employees, it's 80 families, it's 80 people. So if once you start a company like that, you're really taking care of an entire organism, an entire community, and it's very challenging. And then you get bad employees that want to destroy you from the inside, and you have to deal with all this crazy stuff, and all these different influences come in. So really, when you get back to like how do we, like, who's our customer and how do we serve them? So once we stop thinking about making, like, we got to think about making money because we got bills to pay. But if I prioritize being in service to the customer first, everything else takes care of themselves, because that's so rare.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone feels like they're just a fucking number, like a fucking unit. So when you show up, so what I do for the nursery is I go around and help our customers in their grows. And that's just included. So I show up and we figure out what's going wrong. How, like, I say, I need you guys to be in business or I'm not going to be in business. So that's the competitive mentality I have now, is that the customer's not being served well and the people in the industry aren't being served well. And why that's happened, I could talk about and break apart. There was a lot of bloat and there was a lot of regulations that created positions and jobs in companies that didn't need to exist. As a farm, I should be able to directly sell to the
Mm-hmm.
retail. But what happened is then you have a market of relationships as well. And so the distributor was there establishing the relationships for the farm and the relationships of the with the retail and being the intermediary. My advice is, if you are a farm, half your time is going to be farming and half your time is going to be going and developing the relationships with the people that are going to be buying your product. And if you don't do that, then you are the same as the commodity farmer, and then entering in that commodity market, and everything is impersonal. It's not you're not going to be able to express yourself authentically. And in this market, the customers really appreciate authenticity. The customer, I could show you my desk right now, but I have music equipment and all this fun stuff all over. And when I buy a piece of music equipment, I contact the company, I ask them questions, and sometimes I get the owner. And when I get the owner and I get to talk about, like, why did you do that with this guitar pedal? Like, there's this one guitar pedal company where I got this rad modular delay. I won't get too nerdy on that. And I called to ask a question about how to route something. And the owner of the company, the guy that made the pedal, picked up. And I got to talk to him for an hour and a half. I'm
That's
gonna buy
amazing.
every mother I'm gonna buy every motherfucking pedal they make now. Like, I'm invested. And that's the experience I had with something that I love. And if something's wrong, I'm gonna call them and talk to them about it and see if I can help contribute in making it right. And if we started doing that with our customers in cannabis, we're gonna have a much different experience. And like all the weird negative energy will just kind of shed away. But if we're just like, I'm here to take whatever I can as quickly as I can, well, good luck. That
Yeah.
time is done. That time is done.
Well, and the regulations have made it really hard for, like, because I used to sell in Prop 215 and I would go and I love doing vendor days and I would host dab bars for the dispensary holiday parties and do these things where you could actually connect with the bud tender, where you could talk to consumers, customers. But with Prop 64, it was like, now you're going through a distribution company and just the barrier of not having that relationship. Like, how do you create that networking opportunity to serve the customer?
So I think I was fortunate. Instagram has been really helpful to get to that point, right? And when I spent a lot of time answering people's questions. Part of it is just connecting with people online and then following up in real life. That would be the first thing. So if you talk with someone online and you have a meaningful conversation with them and they're generally interested in what you're doing and what you're creating, You don't have to find, get their address for them. I'm like, what state are you in? Da 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 da. And then I'll put out, I'm going to be going to this state this week. I'll be here for 4 or 5 days if you want to link. And then I get an opportunity to link with those people. And if they show up, and I show up for them, I can talk and do all of that. And that's we can connect, give them some seeds. Usually, if someone shows up, I'm going to give them something because they made the effort to come meet with me. That's a gift.
Yeah.
Like someone wants to come fucking meet me, my stupid ass. Like that's fucking awesome. That's like, it's great. That means a lot. And free seed day, last month or the month or so ago was awesome. Like these little events where the communities get together and I'm talking with Edgar and I'm talking with other people on how we can create more of these events that aren't necessarily commercially focused, but more about sharing, more about you show up, you get a bunch of cool shit, right? There's an incentive for you to show up and participate where you don't have to put anything in. And then that spirit gets infectious and everyone really just has a great time. When it feels like a flea market and everyone's hawking their wares, it doesn't feel that great. You feel like you're in a noise factory. So that's been kind of the nucleus of where things have started. And, the legacy guys are trying to do that in Illinois. That's why, like, Ryan over there, who I'm doing the Poetry of Plants bag and the flower and all that with, they're creating the parties. They're creating those events. And then, I go to these parties and I look at it like, where is it weak? What can we make improvements? And then I call the party guy and I'm like, I got 20 ideas. When can I talk to you? And then that person is into it or not. And if they're into it, I'll just give them here are my ideas, take them. I don't want anything. I just want this to be better because it's already awesome. But if we create an even better container, then it can grow. If the container is like not built well at the smallest level, then it's not going to grow. It's going to fall apart once it gets too big. And that's kind of what I think we've seen with Emerald Cup and with High Times as it started to grow. It couldn't withstand the volatility of the market. It couldn't stand all these things. It got too political. Like the spirit of it kind of started to dissipate, even though I think the Emerald Cup still has like carried fundamentally the spirit that brought everything together. But it doesn't, sometimes those things just don't know how to evolve. So we're in a really interesting point where things are changing. And that could be like, oh my God, everything's dying. But that's what happens every year outside. That is the natural course of life. And then something new is going to emerge. And if you're just focused on everything that's all the leaves that are falling off the tree, you're going to miss the fucking flowers that are growing. So my advice is like, look at how we can have something new and better emerge, because we don't want to go through like 3 fire seasons after this. That would suck. And we can avoid that by having conversations, talking about the stuff that you're talking about.
All right. That's a glimpse into one track of the legal-ish cannabis industry. And on the flip side, like I said, 2 names for the same plant. Hemp Lucid CEO Nathan Beckham shares with us why and how he started Hemp Lucid, which is completely legal to be shipped across the country. The same plant can do the same things, but different concentrations of different cannabinoids. Very interesting. So you're not going to want to miss this. Introduce who you are, your relationship with Hemp Lucid, and the company itself.
Yeah, my name's Nathan. I'm currently the CEO at Hemp Lucid. Right now, we've been in business since 2016, and there's 4 of us founders that began in the beginning. When we first started, it was actually me and Chase that had really set up. I was working at eBay at the time. He was a firefighter. I'm a former Marine, and we were like wanting to do a side hustle. And I had learned all this really cool stuff at eBay, being in the e-com there, top accounts. I learned all this apps and all this beta features. So I took that knowledge and we applied and started opening up our own little eBay shop where we were selling counterculture stuff like the Toker Poker. If you've heard of that or seen that out there, we were the number one. We had the first page ranking on SEO for that, and we were selling tons of those. We were selling essential oils. And then we ran into, we quickly learned more about after the 2014 Farm Bill passed and how that opened up the marketing for CBD cannabinoids from hemp. And so we started to dive into that. And within a couple of weeks, we were selling CBD on eBay and Amazon. So we
Nice.
quickly were able to put that up. We were one of the first, and I took that knowledge and I was like, cool, let's just build out these pages, these listings, the best I know how. And we were started, ranking one, and just started selling a ton of product. Because the truth was, is there was at that moment there wasn't a lot of people selling it or getting it out there. We were going to a manufacturer, we were getting big old concentrated syringes. People were using that to try and cure their brain cancer or whatever, and we were just trying to get it out there because it was so novel at the time. There was all this data and studies that were showing that the CBD was affecting everyone in different ways. And the Rick Simpson oil was a big take. So it was like a legal Rick Simpson oil. And yeah, so we were doing well. And then within a couple of weeks, we started, as we hit the top, Amazon and eBay came in from the banks and everything and shut it all down.
Oh.
And so I was like a little bit defeated, but in the end, we kind of regathered ourselves. And the next year in 2016, we launched Hemp Lucid, and our own brand, and with a mission and a vision to create the next generation of supplements utilizing cannabinoids, minor cannabinoids, and eventually mushrooms and other novel ingredients to like what you discussed earlier with the focus, the sleep, and the stress gummies.
Yeah, I absolutely love that you're incorporating functional mushrooms as well as herbal blends that are part of medicinal, like the foundation of medicinal, herbalism. How are you guys choosing these blends? Do you work with an herbalist, right? Who's creating these?
Yeah, we've worked with multiple herbalists and people that have been in that type of the health and wellness where they work on the herbs and mushrooms, and there's a lot of knowledge that we really tap to get into this. At the other side of this, it's you can always just make something and put a ton of stuff into it, but the key is finding the nexus between how much room do you have inside of the product you're trying to. And so in this case, we were like, okay, let's go after sleep, stress support, and let's tie those to minor cannabinoids that we can use. And then also, what other mushrooms can we tie to that? Or herbs. And on the same side, what are the big things that are affecting people? Well, we know sleep is the number one big thing. Why? Well, we all drink coffee or caffeine or do something or drink that pre-workout. And in the end, we're overstimulated by everything that's happening in front of us. And sleep is the number one place to start to heal yourself, is making sure you're getting effective, deep restorative sleep. So we went after that one, and also people want to get off Ambien. People don't like the side effects. There's problems with overuse of melatonin in long term. It starts to affect libido, starts to affect your hormones. And so we were like, let's build a product to help these people that are having that are getting side effects from these products. So we're like, it's obvious. And so when you look at the science, and that's really where we started with everything, you just go deep into the science. And so we're like, okay, we want to do a sleep product. Well, what's cool about the science of cannabinoids is THC, delta 9, and when you smoke it, when you find your old bag of weed and you're like, oh yeah, let's smoke this, and it's been open to the air or whatever, it's not perfectly sealed. And what happens over time, when you smoke it, you get couch locked, right? You smoke it and you're like, man, that was what happened. I just fell asleep on the couch, and you don't know. You're like, okay, well, what happens is scientifically, delta 9 will oxidize over time into CBN. And CBN, all we do is we just isolate that molecule as one of the minors out of hemp cannabinoids and put that into the gummy as the primary active ingredient. And that way, it just really helps people get to sleep and stay to sleep. And then we combine that, in a gummy, there's only a certain amount of room you can add the active ingredients. So we looked at all the best active ingredients out there that people were looking at for sleep aids and made sure we were able to put in enough of it to hit the study levels, right? There's studies associated with lemon balm, for instance, or valerian root, or reishi for sleep. And so we made sure we're like, okay, there's all these different molecules, but if we pick this one, and this one at the active levels, we can actually put that in the gummy, stack it as much as we possibly could, and get as much of those actives at the levels that the studies suggest would induce the effect. And if you have multiple actives, then 95% of the time it's going to work for people, and that's basically the feedback we get from these gummies. And we did the same thing with stress. The minor cannabinoid there, the hero cannabinoid, is delta-9, right? Like a little bit of delta-9 THC is quite effective at reducing stress levels. Well, let's mix that with a little bit of reishi. Let's mix that with ashwagandha. Let's mix that with GABA to help lower the over-impulse control of the nervous system. And together, you can effectively help lower cortisol and bring people out of fight or flight. In fact, just the other day, and it kind of pains me to bring this up, but there was a voicemail left by one of our customers, and she was almost in tears about what and how she was using our stress gummy, and she was using it with she helps girls get out of trafficked situations from the cartel, and she was saying how using the gummies to help these girls like pulled the fight or flight off of them, and where they could almost like come back to normal for a minute. It was when we get these types of weird like calls sometimes where people are like, you won't believe, what is going on with this product, nothing like it. And I think it's just really having that intention of really trying to produce something that's really going to work. And if you really have that intention and you really want to put in the effort, and it's like Elon talks about, start making the best product and the rest will fall in place. And that's really where we went with that. Just trying to really focus on how can we make this the best out there, get ahead of everybody else, and really set the stage for innovation in the hemp space.
Oh yeah, I would have to. I mean, you guys are just blowing it out of the water. I've tried so many different types of supplements with all different cannabinoids, and I love absolutely all of your products. Especially transitioning. I'm going to give you my story. From a heavy stoner to then being 2-year tolerance break because pregnancy and breastfeeding, and then getting back into smoking was so difficult for me to not have anxiety, to just be so high, that your guys's gummies helped me become a stoner again. Like the little microdose is like, okay, enough that I could eat it every day, maybe a couple stress gummies a day. And then the delta-9, okay, now I'm smoking more and not having that overwhelm of like, okay, even just one hit of flower was sending me into anxiety. So I just love it. And I love that you're incorporating the functional mushrooms. Like I said, it's all around just a wonderful product. So I appreciate you guys and what you're doing. I have a question. Why don't you have like this is total rant off the topic, but you're talking about sleep and how everyone is overstimulated, right? Coffee. So I have gotten off of coffee in the last year because of that correlation with sleep, anxiety, and I'm just doing mushroom lattes. Are you guys going to plan on doing a mushroom coffee replacement or something? I feel like that would go right in line with your guys' products.
You're absolutely right. It's definitely been a product we've talked about a lot. And it's something we really were investigating at one point of doing. It's not really up our alley exactly. We were trying to look at it, but if we have the opportunity, I definitely would look at that. I think it's a great idea because that's kind of where we came with the focus gummy was, we wanted to be able to help people and not have something that had a ton of caffeine, but also have the lion's mane, L-theanine, L-tyrosine, and then the CBG molecule. CBG from hemp is known for mental clarity, and that's why that focus gummy is so great. And it kind of gives a little bit of joy, and it gives that focus from all the other stuff, and it's such a great item. But yeah, I agree with you. I would love to do a mushroom coffee. There are a lot of great brands out there right now that are doing it. I do have I kind of want to do a mushroom superfood stick pack that I'm thinking about doing that would be really awesome. Convenient factor, on the go, travel, dump it in a water, shake it up, and there you go. We did do beverages at one point. You probably don't even know this, but me and Chase back in 2020 launched with Anheuser-Busch out of Florida with one of the first CBD waters, hemp beverages actually out in Florida right before COVID, and COVID hit and shut down all the stores and like ended our whole launch. But we were into beverage quite a bit, and we ended up patenting that process to create CBD water without emulsion. So through just sheer mechanic, so basically the first organic, and that's really what we have. We have an organic water soluble product that doesn't use dirty emulsifiers, and that's part of one of our proprietary processes, as well as our patent that lets us do. We were able to emulsify isolate without any emulsifier, just by pure sheer process, and it was pretty fantastic. So it was a great product. But then, when COVID came through and shut all the stores down, and it was a really bad launch timing wise.
Oh man, COVID ruined a lot of things. What's your personal story with cannabis and cannabinoids and mushrooms? What brings you? I mean, you have the background with the eBay and all of that, but what's your personal, like, the soul story?
Yeah, I'll give you. Well, it starts really. I was born on 420.
All right.
This where it starts. At 4:23 in the afternoon, I was coming out looking for that spliff, and honestly, it drives me. I feel like at this point in the game, it is a mission, it is a destiny for me to continue to drive innovation in this industry and provide products. The customer stories and that we get is enough to bring anybody to tears, and just the lives that we've changed with these products is unbelievable. People have spent over tens of thousands of dollars with us over the years, and much gratitude, unbelievable fans of ours, unbelievable customers, and their stories. So, like, in the end, I'm drawn to it because of that. But my personal story was, it really helped me. One thing, it helps you get off alcohol, because then you kind of transition from that, which is nice. But I really loved it. On the healing side, anxiety for one, it really helped me kind of calm my mind a little, from being overstimulated. But really, injuries, sunburns, we've done everything with CBD, so many things with CBD that I've been able to help myself in so many different ways over the years that it's like everything I use. On my immune capsules are one of my favorite products, because as soon as I feel like I'm about to get sick, I just start taking those. And again, those were developed with those master herbalists, and it has seaweed in it and all these other mushrooms. And when you take that, it's like you don't realize you're sick. You'll stop, and then you're like, oh, am I sick? And you'll stop taking the capsules, and the symptoms will come back. But it's just so night and day when you use cannabis products for your health journey, and when you're consciously engaged in trying to improve the wellness of your life, and utilizing cannabis for that has a significant impact, just because it's such a master plant. The molecules in there are so powerful. We all have an endocannabinoid system, and so when these molecules mimic our endogenous cannabinoids, we can easily process them without side effects. And it's like the plant grew up with humans over the course of thousands of years. And it's only been recently, the last 100 years up until recently, that we really wasn't a part of society that much. And so when you bring it back to society with all the technology and all the science, it's going to look like a panacea, because all of a sudden you have all the science looking at it all at once. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, we could use it for this, we could use it for that. Well, when you look at corn, it was used for everything. You know what I mean? So it's the same concept. Once you turn science and the people onto it, we're going to find all these uses for this. In my opinion, I do believe that the reason why a lot of the pharmaceutical companies have ended up purchasing most of the medical marijuana companies, because the future of pharmaceutical is cannabinoids. I do believe that cannabinoids, there's over 144 different cannabinoids within the cannabis plant. When you bring in the terpenes and other things, there's combinations that can be achieved for utilizing AI and DNA to help ratios, create things that will help everybody out with, and not have to use these isolated pharmaceutical compounds that have significant side effects. So I do believe that's the future of medicine.
Oh yeah, agree 100%. I mean, before Prohibition, it was the number one medicine in America. It was in every single doctor's cornucopia of products. I mean, it was all cannabis. So totally agree with you on that. And thank you for sharing your use of cannabis. Everyone here and listening to this is obviously very invested in cannabis, in growing it, and has their own stories. So it's really cool to just see you sharing this on a massive level, like a national level, being able to bring this without the prohibition of it being technically cannabis, it being like, hemp according to the law. Um, can we talk about that a little bit? Because I was just like so blown away with how you could, like, Delta 9 gummies can get you high because it's what, 2.5 milligrams, so it's half a percent less than. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a good question because it is confusing a little bit. But in the end, the federal law is 0.3% by weight delta 9 THC. And so, or THC delta 9. So that does not apply to THC delta 8, which is a slightly different molecule. And honestly, I think, in my opinion, sourced correctly, is a better molecule for edibles than delta 9. Both delta 8 and delta 9 actually turn into the same molecule in the stomach and have a very similar effect on the body, except that delta 8, for the most part, has a better bell curve. So when you take, everyone talks about, I took the delta 9 gummy, and I had the worst experience, right? Like, there's always someone that's oversensitive. It's because the delta 9 curve is very quick, like this. And so that spike in the bloodstream can cause negative experiences, right, where it's overwhelming. Delta 8 kind of has a longer profile with less of a spike. So I think that there is room for these minor cannabinoids, and so delta 8 was not included in the original federal outline. And when they passed the 2018 Farm Bill, minor cannabinoids derived from hemp are legal. And so when we grow hemp plants, and those hemp plants stay under 0.3% THC, delta 9, then those are legal hemp plants. And when you harvest them, then they will take that harvest, and you have to do a lot more plants, but they can then pull out these minor cannabinoids that appear in it. So when you grow like a marijuana plant, it's going to have a 20 to 25% THC level at the plant level. And when they extract that out, the marijuana plants typically don't have the other minors like CBD does, because cannabis was always bred for its high, because they weren't really looking at the minor cannabinoids. So over the decades, it kind of bred out some of these minors. So they get a lot of THC, while the hemp gets a lot of these other cannabinoids. So when we extract them, we can distill and derive different minors out of those concentrations. And they do that. So, like, for instance, if we extract a ton of the hemp plant, we can pull the CBD out, and then we can pull the THC out, or we can combine those and put those in a product and just make sure the THC does not go above the 0.3% by weight. And that's really what it is. So as long as the extract, it comes from a hemp plant, and then when you put that into a product, you keep the THC levels below the 0.3%, then in essence, that is a 100% legal product. And that's why you see hemp beverages accelerating, because you could put 10 milligrams of THC in a hemp beverage, and by weight, it's definitely under 0.3%. And the same thing works for a gummy. Gummies are heavy sugar, so they weigh about 3, 4, 5 grams. So you can put in easily 3 or 4 milligrams of THC delta 9 and still be under the legal limit. And that's pretty much how we do it, and I wouldn't say get away with it, but that's how we stay within the laws and make it legal.
Cat Lady coming at you with a Blaze update. Things are swimming along, or growing along, as the case may be. The summer is definitely starting to heat up for everyone around. It was a little bit of a slow start for a lot of those up north, like Alex in Washington. I heard folks in Canada are having the same issue, but, it's either cold, wet, or, as I heard someone say, you get forest fires. So, double-edged sword. Things are definitely growing along with Blaze. People are sharing photos and asking questions, and, it's a great community. Definitely trying hard, figuring stuff out, and keeping it going. If you want to help support the citizen science project in collecting data from across the country on how cannabis grows in different climates and variables, you can join the Patreon tier Friends of Blaze for just $1. Or if you have been liking what you're hearing on this podcast, join one of the other levels. And now back to Alex.
All right. Thank you for joining us on this economic and historical journey. Be sure to subscribe to Sungrown Stories wherever you listen to podcasts and catch up on all of our latest episodes that explore the fascinating world of sun-grown. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review, share it with your friends. Until next time, this is Alex Irons, Queen of the Sun-Grown, signing off.
There was a light, let it come in, choosing her sin. Every morning, choosing to be sad.